Hey, it's the Arvind and Mike show. He's an education investor and I'm an education entrepreneur. We are both dads to two kids. He's a Carolina Tar Heel with Indian parents, whereas I am a Duke Blue Devil with Jewish parents. All of which meaning there are 4 retirees out there disappointed that neither of us became doctors.
Mike, today you got a kid story?
Yesterday, the 10-year-old was planning her lemonade stand, like with great detail.
Yeah.
And so, dad's excited, like, look at my little entrepreneur. And so then she says, we're having a debate. My buddy thinks we should sell the lemonade for $1. What do you think? I'm like, I don't know. I would sell it for 50 cents. And she said, yeah, but $1, you get $1. And I'm like, well, but 50 cents one, you get a lot more people who think it's a good deal. And your cost is only what, like 10 cents? You might sell twice as many. Plus, you guys are reasonably cute since you're 10. Like, a lot of buyers might actually say, keep the change. You might actually yield 80 cents by charging 50 cents. She's loving this. She's into it. And of course, Arvind, you know me, like,
Yeah.
I want to now do an economics lesson for an hour.
Yeah. You want to run a RCT, really, is what you want to do.
Oh my God, we want to A/B test. There's so many angles to this. And she's like, okay, Dad, I got enough. Like, I think 50 cents is a good idea. Let's just move on here.
All right, well, it's a start.
Okay, but then she's like, I need a folding table for this thing. Now, it's January. She wants to do a summertime lemonade stand. She's like, can I go on Amazon and buy a folding table?
Wow.
And she's like, we'll pay for it out of our earnings. I'm like, all right, but we have a folding table in the garage.
Yeah.
Dad, that one's too big. But we have a folding table. Mom has that little folding table. Dad, that one's too small.
Wow.
So immediately she's all about accessorizing. Yep. And, I don't know she's very keen to spend on capital investments.
Okay. Wow. If you're the right landlord, then or the right kind of owner, operator, shareholder, you can drive a lot of change in this business.
Well, the other fun part of the lemonade thing for kids is it quickly gets into zoning.
Yeah.
So, you want to set up a lemonade stand in front of the big public library.
Yeah.
And of course, you're not allowed to set up that without like a million permits. But I mean, if you're kids and you're cute,
right,
like, who's really going to shut you down?
Yeah.
She had a great time once doing it before, but that was for charity.
Yeah.
Genuinely, there was a sign that said it was for charity, and it all went to charity. This one, they want to make some money.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I'm like, yeah, you never know.
The 21st century form of child exploitation.
Exactly.
I can't open up in front of the Boston Library, but guess I know someone who can.
Exactly, right. You could be, what was that? Is it Dickens? Like, I don't know if it's Great Expectations or the other one.
Yeah. Where,
you mobilize the kids as your beggars. Like,
the front is lemonades, but when you come up, they actually sell you iPhones. So it's like,
you upsell to $1,000. It's genius. I love it.
Wait, but I can't let this go now that you brought up lemonade stands and my hilarious experience with a lemonade stand during a pandemic.
What's that?
Okay, so we new residents in North Carolina. It's hard to move during a pandemic, hard to meet people. So we're constantly trying to be neighborly.
Yes.
So we're here during the summer and we go on neighborhood walks. We try to smile, say hello to people, try to generally engage. So whole family's walking together and we pass these kids setting up a lemonade stand, and it's a little out of the way. I have my wallet with me, but I'm like, you know what? We're here. We're trying to set the right example. Let's go participate despite this pandemic. We're gonna I'll just get a lemonade, pour it out. We'll do something nice for them. They don't need to know what happens here. So we'll take the lemonades with us, pour them out later. This is back earlier in the pandemic when I think alerts were at higher. Now I'd probably just drink it. So we start walking to them, and then a series of craziness happens. First, they're charging $1 and I only have a 10. So I'm like, okay, I was like, here's 10. The kid asked me, do you want change?
Oh!
And I'm like, yes. Like, it's too big. It's not, if I had given like, if it was a different
Yes.
multiple, but it was
Yes.
10 and, like it's a $1
Yes.
lemonade, feels like I
Yeah.
need to get some change on this. It's like, I'm not this generous to new neighbors. So he's like, actually, I don't have change. I got to go ask my dad. And I'm like, all right, go. And so, okay, we're the opening customers here.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, can you have, I'll have 2 lemonades, one for each of my girls. And so they hand me these 2, like, kind of like cheap, like almost like a McDonald's Happy Meal type cup.
Yeah.
Okay, so they hand me those types of cups. And I was like, all right, thank you. And first of all, they fill them to the absolute brim. Like, it's like overflowing.
Right, they want to give you good value for your $10.
They're spilling all over. And then I like turn to walk away and they go, excuse me, we're going to need those cups back. I'm like, wait, what? These cheap, flimsy cups, you're trying to get them back? We actually have to pretend to drink this. So I'm like, getting my girls there. I'm like, hey, will you girls don't actually drink this, but pretend to drink it? And the girls are 3 and 1 at the time. They're just like, what are you saying? We want to drink the lemonade. So they're going bananas. My wife is just like standing like 20 feet away pretending she doesn't know us. So it was just an overall, I ended up leaving without getting my $9 change. Them drinking the lemonade. It was a total disaster. One of the worst lemonade experiences of my life.
I love it. Welcome to North Carolina, where the lemonade stands are not what you wish.
So anyways, the natural transition is to talk about K-12 schools.
Yeah, why are they teaching kids how to run better lemonade stands?
Yeah, or is a school really much different than a lemonade stand?
Or can you teach common sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. But okay, here's my proposal to you for today. Isn't it too hard to be a K-12 school offering something new today?
My experience is that if you are starting a charter school that is therefore free to parents, you can get customers, and the limiting variable is more the state government that is making you do pretty much everything the way every other school does.
Yes.
If you are starting a private school, depending on the state, you might have pretty much a clean sheet of paper, although it's not entirely.
Yeah.
States still regulate it. But I agree that it's very hard to get parents to even accept a new vanilla regular school that's just, hey, we're a regular school of high quality. Like, why would I trust you?
Yep.
And then if you're adding to that new innovative idea, the barrier gets even higher. So it is hard to start a new school, private school of any type.
Yeah.
Like, you just think about your girls, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to send your 4-year-old next year to a kindergarten that's brand new?
Yeah.
What's the upside versus the potential downside to you and your wife is like, man, what if they really get it wrong?
Yeah.
Like, one, it could be a crappy experience and maybe she would get turned off to school.
Yep.
And plus the 1% chance that it would actually be unsafe.
Yeah.
Like, that really gets you scared.
Yeah.
All of these make it hard to start school.
Yeah. Let's double click on the private school side of things. So like, what was the experience like with Croft?
Scott and I went to parents in Boston and said, hey, we're proven school guys. We have some cool ideas for an unusual type of school. It's kind of a modern one-room schoolhouse called a micro school.
Yep.
So the size of it is very different, and that frees us up to create a better experience following few ways. And we have an idea for an elementary version and an idea for a middle school version.
Yeah.
These were middle-class families. They could otherwise choose either their local public school, which I think in a lot of the cities we were looking, like, they didn't think that highly of, or an expensive private school. So another part of this was like, we're halfway between the free you'd pay for the public and the like large tuition you'd pay for a fancy private.
Yep.
So those were the two ideas. What we found is parents liked us. They liked Scott. They're like, wow, Scott, my God, he's an impressive guy. He's started other schools.
Yeah. And then there's Mike.
But we kind of airbrushed me as much as we could out of the picture. But anyway, what we found is they wanted a very good school at the price we were offering, but they wanted it to be traditional. The idea that it would be, they wanted all our bells and whistles, but they hated the idea of the tiny one-room schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't want the whole school to be 30 kids.
Yeah.
They're like, why can't the whole school be 200 kids?
Right.
We'll have one class of grade K and one of grade 1 and so forth. So we could not get our idea going of the micros, but Scott in particular was like, I'm excited actually about this other version of what the customer wants. And so I want to build a few like of these traditional private schools that just have unbelievable teaching
Yep.
and unbelievable customer service. So that was the story. We couldn't persuade people to kind of buy our kind of cool new product.
Well, it's still a new product, I would say. It's just it's a more an adjacent to existing flavors than like a completely new flavor. Wouldn't you say?
Right. But I think like if you sort of zoom out, if a parent visits a micro school and you just say, visit this school, and they show up and they're like, wow, then they're like, this is different from other schools by its size.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If they go visit the Croft School, hopefully they say, this is a very, very well run traditional school.
Got it.
Right? Like from their point of view, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what I would expect a good school to be.
Yep.
This has so many check marks of what I would think of as good school.
Yeah.
Great teacher relationships, nice classrooms, bright colors, clean,
Yeah.
warm, kind, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I just talked to someone today who is a former, 20-year school head, has a school that she's changed ownership hands and, kind of philosophy changed, and she found herself no longer excited by that, how that school ran. And she's been trying to start a new school, and she has a property that she's like trying to connect all these dots where she's found a property. She's trying to get some of the parents who are interested to like contribute to like financing the property, but they're like, this doesn't feel like a real estate investment. This feels kind of like a startup investment. And then like, this is a lot of more capital than I'm usually, like I want this, but do I want it to this extent? It's like threading this needle that feels incredibly hard both to finance and to execute.
The barriers to entry of starting a new private school are really high. But I will say in 1999, when I walked around the neighborhoods of Boston and I said, hey, I'm like a 28-year-old guy who's never worked actually in a school, but I, have a degree in education. I'm going to start this new school, new high school.
Yeah.
And I met with parents of 8th graders. They're like, where's the building? I'm like, I don't know yet. Who's the principal? I haven't found him yet. Okay, well, you seem nice and our schools are shitty. So I want to send my 8th grader to your new school.
Yeah.
And so we had 240 kids apply for the first admission lottery where we took 80 of the 240. Like, in other words, with nothing but a pitch, with nothing but a brochure, the parents were desperate enough to say, yeah, sign me up for that. I mean, it's a charter, it's free, and you seem to care.
Yeah.
And what it's hard for me to find so far in my kids' experience is someone who believes in my daughter or my son.
Yeah.
And who cares. So you've already checked the boxes.
Yep.
But boy, what a big contrast
yes.
to starting a private school for middle-class families with other pretty solid options that they would be pretty content with.
Yep.
Because the first one in VC terms is an aspirin, right? It's a pain point. They're not happy right now.
Yeah.
And something like Croft, to a degree, is a vitamin.
Yes.
If Croft doesn't exist, they still can have a good school for their kids.
Yep.
But not in Dorchester
yeah.
at that time, So big differences.
Yep. Okay, so now I'm going to take you to the next part of my hypothesis.
Okay.
Which is, I think, one of the major reasons why it's hard to be a K-12 school, especially one that's offering something new, is it's too hard currently to be anything in between an in-person school or a virtual school. So there's currently the in-person traditional school that sits there and markets to your local students. And there's a virtual school that essentially has no physical location, but, has a much obviously wider population of potential applicants. But there really isn't much of a market in between those two.
Correct. So by nature, I tend to like hybrid solutions in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
And Match, a few of the guys there developed even like a little hybrid college, as you know, which is essentially they take Southern New Hampshire University online, but they add in-person place where people can go and get one-to-one tutoring to support them specifically in their college studies.
Yeah.
And, working with kids like in their young 20s. And that's gone pretty well. Like it's a hybrid solution to college, right?
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of solutions like that that are out there. I've been very interested, particularly COVID has normalized the idea of virtual schooling. Could you create a hybrid high school experience, and you and I've talked about that. Like, I'm sort of excited about not just that it's not normal all in person or that it's all virtual. So it's not like just that it's half and half isn't exciting to me.
Yeah.
To me, what's exciting is that I think you could make the in person experience so much better by having less of it. Almost like the difference between the weekend you can create for your guests when they come over,
Yes.
for a couple days versus if they're going to like stay on your couch for a month, where it's like, all right, you're on your own. I'm just living my life.
I mean, I think you're so right, because one of the key learnings any parent of a kid has had through this pandemic is, one, they really don't learn as much as I thought they did during those school hours. And two, I actually still see the value in those school hours, in some part of those school hours. So they very much feel in between, which is, no parent I've talked to says, oh, you know what? Now I'm thinking we should go completely virtual. Like, no one is like, man, now I see the light of, like, this is the dream outside path. And also, no one's been like, man, I can't believe how much time they spend learning at these schools. Like, I can't believe how packed this schedule is.
Yeah. And I would add to that, I think parents, of my estimate is 20%. 20% of kids clearly prefer a little bit of in-person school, enough to keep their social relationship.
Yeah.
And then, being at home.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, if it's going to be roughly the same, like the advantage of physically being there for the teacher to do the exact same thing in a physical room of 20, where they might as well be on their futon with the dog there to pet.
Yeah.
And their like cup of hot chocolate at home, without the commute necessarily during the winter and some other things. They just feel more relaxed. Like, once you walk into, and so this is probably, it tells a little bit more introverted people that have to, like, once they're in a building of a few hundred people, they have to generate that energy to be around other people. You have to be on in a certain way.
Yeah.
And what happens is you have to be on, like, from a middle school student's point of view, in between classes, at lunch, before school, after school, like all the times when it's social, you got to be on.
Yeah.
So for some people, it's like, wow, if I could do that 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week, it's just the right dosage for me.
Yeah. Such a great, yeah. My dad is like an introvert. No one can really believe it that isn't part of his family, because anytime he is, like, we're at a party or something, he's just the life of the party. Like, he's the guy telling the stories, making everyone laugh. Like, he's just the absolute center of parties. But it's like, he wouldn't go to them if it weren't for my mom. Like, when he leaves them, he just, like, retracts into his shell.
Totally. I'm the same. I'm like your dad. I mean, I can do pretty well in a party situation, but like the definition of introvert is that you drain your battery by being around others, and you need recharge time that's solo. And so in any case, I think what we both agree is like, what didn't exist a year ago is at least some parents and teenagers that are more aware of an alternative.
Yeah.
Which is, if it were available, I guess I would like to have a mix of in-person and online school.
Yeah.
I don't want to stick with no socialization.
Yeah.
But nor do I want to go back to 5 day a week till 3 o'clock.
Yep. So let me give you the one example I know of in K-12 that exists in this kind of hybrid world. So there's this school in Chicago that I absolutely love. It's called the Bennett Day School. Okay. And the guy who started it, or one of the guys who started it, his name is Cameron Smith. He grew up actually 15 minutes from where I grew up. Shout out to West Bloomfield. And
West Bloomfield, is that Indiana?
No, Michigan. Come on.
Michigan. Sorry.
Jeez, that was offensive. Indiana?
I thought it was Michigan, but then is Bloom? What's the Bloom in Indiana?
There's Bloomington.
Bloomington.
Yeah.
Sorry, I somehow pictured you and Cameron Smith.
Yeah.
Like in the movie Breaking Away, like riding your bikes really fast. But that's an Indiana thing. You guys are Michigan people. Yeah. So you didn't even get a bike. No. You had to get a car.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Quick tangent on cars. My dad worked for Ford for 20 years and was at his most senior at Ford when my sister turned 16. So in her first year of driving, she had a summer Ford Mustang convertible And then, like, for the winter, so she didn't have to drive a rear wheel for the safety, she switched to a Ford Explorer with leather seats. It's like my dad just spoiled the crap out of her in her first year of driving. And then in between, when I turned 16, he leaves Ford and works for a cereal company. And I turned 16 and I get like a Honda Accord. And like, I'm like, this is complete garbage.
But the trunk is full of like cinnamon toast
Yeah.
crunch.
I got like, I'm serialed out for life with that. Yeah. So, anyways, but coming back to the point here. Bennett Day School. It's an amazing school, like a really interesting, like innovation. You know, I would call it similar to Croft. They try to do a traditional school very well in the K8 element. But Cameron has always had an eye since he started this to thinking, how do I, in offering something new, how do I create a broader I know there are people who are going to love this, but why am I limiting that to only those people in Chicago, in like this part of Chicago to potential? Because there may be true fans or like people that could generate, that would find things we're doing interesting that are outside that. So he always had that kind of thought of like, how do I create a broader vision for this? And so he created a partnership with Northwestern University where they created something called Bennett Labs, where they'd spend time in the classroom and try to develop products coming out of that may be able to be sold to other teachers or even direct to consumer into actual parents. And I don't know. I mean, you can ask him. It's been several years since he started it. I think he would be the first to admit it's been a very hard road to finance this proposition and to execute this proposition. I think they're doing a great job, and I think they could be very successful. But the jury is still out. But the fact that that's the only one that I know, doesn't that mean something? Shouldn't there be like 100x variants of this out there, of like people trying to do something in between?
Yeah, so a couple quick thoughts. One is, over the last bunch of years, I think because we did a few quote unquote innovative things that matched or spun some out as their own nonprofits or whatever, exported some stuff. I get a lot of calls from people in education that make interesting things, but what they can't solve is the distribution and sales side of it.
Yep.
And that's a big problem that, because most of our K-12 sector in the US is public, it's, there's all these barriers.
Yeah.
And there's all these forces that converge everybody on vanilla offering.
Yes.
So, and that's true whether you're a parent, a kid, or a teacher, right? Like a teacher, unfortunately, there's a lot of boring training that's sort of very standard. So there's not the kind of specialization and variety that would delight people.
Yep.
Because it's almost like the Soviet grocery store, right? It's like, well, yes, here is bread, here is meat,
yeah,
here is like cookie,
yeah,
and it's like there's one version of each,
yeah,
and it's whatever's lowest common denominator, and like you basically all the absence of a market. And you think about, just briefly, the analogy that I've typically thought about is always, whether it's a teacher or parent, like your choices in education are so constrained, and yet if you ask those people about their choices in fitness and exercise,
yeah,
oh my God, it's like every type of equipment, every type of personal coaching,
yeah,
every type of, new whole categories like the races in the mud, Tough Mudder, where you do a competition for a day and you do it with a group, and it's like there's so much variation in every possible way, at price, at time, at interest, at geography, and everybody just sort of like, yeah, that's great, I love those choices. And you're like, well, wouldn't it be great, to use your phrase, if that was true as a teacher and you could choose vastly different field trips and curriculum and teacher training and compensation packages and a million different things?
Yeah.
It was like, but it's hard for people to imagine that. And you and I were thinking about that with food too, right? Food is a pretty well-developed category.
Yes.
In terms of choice.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of things about education that conspire to limit the chances of entrepreneurs like you and me to create fun stuff.
Like you had even talked about, you were sharing yesterday that you had a friend had this idea for like a high school for the social sciences.
Yes. So her idea, and I don't think she would mind sharing it, is, hey, there are in the US a whole bunch of schools of math and science, right? High schools of math. That's a pretty popular thing, hundreds of.
Yeah.
What if instead of forcing people to wait till they're 18 years old before they dive into the social sciences,
yeah,
you took the handful of people in the country that are all geeked out about psychology and sociology and all the ologies, like at age 14. They're already reading it. They're already reading, Thinking Fast and Slow and whatever they're doing, maybe taking some online college courses. They're just into it.
Yeah.
And so they have no friends that are into it. It's too isolated.
Yep.
It's like, and her idea is like, couldn't we pull all these kids together, maybe into a virtual high school? Maybe there's some in-person component, who knows? But to me, that's specialization.
Yes.
That could be, for some kids, a game-changing, life-changing, the difference between going to a normal high school that's fine and going through something that they love and they remember fondly.
Yep.
So deeply, and they end up with a bunch of buddies that are with them for life.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful idea. And if you add up, I believe there's like hundreds of those kinds of niches. It could be that virtual opens the door to specialization. Right now, we could, boringly talk it through, but everybody kind of understands the map of what specialization is available to parents. And it's not like really radical ideas.
So this leads me to my final point, which is, wouldn't it be awesome if there was a ghost kitchen for education?
Explain.
Okay, so this ghost kitchen is essentially like a facility designed for food preparation that has no place for in-person dining. So essentially they're delivery only.
Yes.
And what that allows that space to be used for is anybody who wants to start a restaurant or wants to be some sort of professional chef of some sort doesn't have to take the complexity of a physical space. The whole idea, especially obviously a pandemic has accelerated this because of the loss of in-person dining, but just as a restaurateur in general, you can test the demand for your product. Now delivery platforms have become so ubiquitous that you can potentially offer a successful path to existence that's lower capital up front, that allows you to efficiently scale to a wider audience faster.
Yes. And you and I, in our discussions about this, I'm equally pumped about this idea because from a restaurateur's point of view, it maps to a social entrepreneur who might want to start a school. And not only does it solve potentially the real estate limitation and lower the capital costs a lot to get your little school going, but there's a version of this where the cloud kitchen or the ghost kitchen, I guess cloud kitchen is like the Uber founder's branded version of the ghost kitchen, can help you find the customer.
Yeah.
The two big challenges, right? Like, it's hard to have physical space if you want one.
Sure.
Hard to get parents to cross the chasm of credibility.
Sure.
And it's hard to find customers because it's expensive to market.
Yeah.
And the idea of a platform in this case, the idea that you could have a 500 student school that could be stood up more easily, that's exciting.
Yeah, that comes back to my observation during this pandemic, because that's my hypothesis as well, because of the experience of how parents now view. I don't have as much of visibility into how kids are viewing it, but my visibility into how parents are viewing it seems to mirror that. They don't maybe talk in hybrid terms because they don't even see that as a realistic option, but they're essentially describing it.
Yeah, it's the classic problem of creating a new category, right? Is like, you have an idea of a service that would delight people, but it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And so you can't just say, oh, it's a Ford Mustang.
Yeah.
It's like this convertible.
Yeah.
But a little different, right? It's like, people get it that it's a school, but it's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
All right, man.
This has been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it.
Can I make a new prediction about ghost kitchens?
Yes.
Maybe it already exists and then this is actually not a prediction, but I actually think there will be some variant on a ghost kitchen where they will offer in-person dining with multiple restaurants on the back end.
Isn't that called like a food hall?
Damn. Isn't that called a food hall?
Have you been to a high-end food hall?
No. Is that really a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing now. Anytime there's a pop culture thing that I know that you don't know, there's like almost something seriously wrong.